Dr. Sarah Chen found herself staring at the antique leather chair in her office at 3:47 a.m., her hands trembling as she clutched the security footage from the past week. The chair sat empty now, but the recordings told a different story, a story that defied everything she thought she knew about reality, about her patients, and about herself. For 7 days, she had watched patient after patient sit in that chair during their therapy sessions. But what the cameras captured wasn't just conversations about trauma and healing. It was something far more sinister. Each person who sat in that chair began to exhibit the same terrifying behavior. They would suddenly stop mid-sentence, their eyes would glaze over, and they would begin speaking in voices that weren't their own, voices that seemed to know Sarah's darkest secrets. The most chilling part wasn't what they said. It was the fact that none of them remembered saying it. And now, as Sarah stared at the chair in the dim light of her office, she realized she was about to discover the twisted truth about what happens when you sit down and face your deepest fears. 3 weeks earlier, Sarah had been riding high on professional success. Her psychology practice was thriving, her revolutionary exposure therapy techniques were gaining recognition, and she had just published a paper on confronting phobias through controlled environments. The antique chair had arrived as a gift from a grateful patient, or so she thought. Mrs. Whitmore had insisted it would be perfect for Sarah's office, claiming it had special properties that would help patients open up. Sarah had laughed it off as the eccentric rambling of an elderly woman, but she accepted the chair anyway. It was beautiful, after all, rich mahogany frame with deep burgundy leather that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with intricate carvings along the arms that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of view. Sarah positioned it directly across from her desk, the centerpiece of her carefully designed therapeutic space. She had no idea that this simple act of kindness would soon unravel everything she believed about the human mind and the nature of fear itself. The first sign that something was wrong came during her session with Marcus, a war veteran struggling with PTSD. He had been making remarkable progress over the past few months, but the moment he settled into the new chair, his entire demeanor changed. His usual nervous energy gave way to an eerie stillness, and when he spoke, his voice carried a confidence that seemed foreign to his personality. "You know, Dr. Chen," he said, his eyes never leaving hers, "you've been having those dreams again. The ones where you're back in that hospital room, watching your sister die while you do nothing to save her." Sarah's blood turned to ice. She had never told anyone about her sister's death, about the guilt that had driven her to become a therapist in the first place. Marcus continued, his voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality, "She's still angry with you, you know. She visits you every night, standing at the foot of your bed, asking why you chose your career over her final moments." The session ended abruptly when Marcus suddenly blinked, confusion washing over his face as he asked what they had been discussing. Sarah tried to convince herself it was a coincidence, that Marcus had somehow overheard her talking to a colleague or had made a lucky guess. But deep down, she knew there was no logical explanation for what had happened. She began researching the chair's history, but every lead seemed to vanish into thin air. The antique dealer who had supposedly sold it to Mrs. Whitmore claimed no record of the transaction. Mrs. Whitmore herself had mysteriously moved away, leaving no forwarding address. Even more disturbing, when Sarah tried to contact other patients who had used the chair, she discovered that several had stopped coming to therapy altogether, while others reported experiencing vivid nightmares and unexplained panic attacks. The chair seemed to exert a pull on her, drawing her attention during quiet moments in her office. She would catch herself staring at it, mesmerized by the way shadows played across its surface, creating patterns that seemed almost alive. The rational part of her mind screamed that she was projecting her own guilt and trauma onto an inanimate object, but the growing list of disturbing incidents suggested otherwise. The psychological thriller took a darker turn when Sarah decided to test her theory by sitting in the chair herself. It was a decision born of desperation and professional curiosity. She needed to understand what was happening to her patients. The moment she settled into the warm leather, a wave of vertigo washed over her, and the familiar walls of her office seemed to shift and breathe around her. She found herself transported to memories she had buried deep in her subconscious, moments of shame, regret, and fear that she had spent years trying to forget. But these weren't just memories, they were vivid, tactile experiences that made her feel as though she was reliving them in real time. She saw herself as a child, cowering in her bedroom closet while her parents fought violently in the next room. She felt the crushing weight of medical school, the nights she had chosen studying over visiting her dying sister in the hospital. Most terrifying of all, she experienced moments that felt like memories but couldn't possibly be real, conversations with patients that had never happened, diagnoses she had never made, and a growing sense that someone else was controlling her thoughts and actions. The first major plot twist came when Sarah discovered that she wasn't the chair's first victim. Hidden within the depths of the university library, she found a collection of case studies dating back to the 1950s, all documenting the same phenomena she was experiencing. Dr. Edmund Blackwood, a psychiatrist who had owned the chair decades earlier, had written extensively about its therapeutic properties before his mysterious disappearance. His notes revealed a chilling pattern. Patients who sat in the chair would begin exhibiting signs of dissociative identity disorder, but the alternate personalities that emerged weren't random, they were manifestations of the deepest, darkest aspects of the therapist's own psyche. The chair wasn't just revealing patients' fears, it was projecting the therapist's repressed thoughts and emotions through them. Sarah realized with growing horror that every disturbing revelation her patients had shared wasn't coming from their own minds, it was coming from hers. The chair had somehow tapped into her unconscious guilt and trauma, forcing her to confront her own psychological demons through the people she was trying to help. This revelation shattered her understanding of her own professional competence and mental stability. As Sarah delved deeper into the mystery, she discovered that the chair's influence extended far beyond her office walls. Security footage from the building revealed that she had been coming to work at strange hours, sometimes in the middle of the night, with no memory of these visits. During these nocturnal trips, she would sit in the chair for hours, her lips moving in silent conversation with invisible companions. The recording showed her exhibiting multiple distinct personalities, some aggressive and confrontational, others meek and pleading. Most disturbing of all, she appeared to be conducting therapy sessions with empty chairs, as if treating patients who weren't there. The rational part of her mind struggled to process this evidence, but the growing pile of documentation couldn't be ignored. She began to question everything, her memories, her professional abilities, and even her own identity. The line between therapist and patient was blurring, and Sarah found herself wondering if she had ever been the competent professional she believed herself to be, or if she had always been just another damaged individual seeking healing in all the wrong places. The second plot twist emerged when Sarah realized that Mrs. Whitmore had never been a patient at all. Cross-referencing her appointment logs with the building's security records revealed no evidence that the elderly woman had ever visited the office. Even more chilling, when Sarah examined the chair more closely, she found a small brass plate hidden beneath the seat cushion that read, "Property of Dr. Sarah Chin, 1987 to 2023. The date made no sense. Sarah had been born in 1987 and was only 36 years old. But as she stared at the inscription, fragmented memories began to surface. She remembered being much older, decades of therapy practice, and a growing obsession with a particular patient who had reminded her of her deceased sister. The memories were hazy and contradictory, but they suggested a terrifying possibility, that the chair wasn't just affecting her patients, it was affecting her perception of time and reality itself. She began to suspect that she might have been trapped in some sort of psychological loop, reliving the same traumatic experiences over and over again, each time forgetting what had come before and starting fresh with new patients who were actually manifestations of her own fractured psyche. The truth about the haunted chair began to crystallize when Sarah discovered her own patient file hidden in a locked drawer of her desk, a file she had no memory of creating. The notes were written in her handwriting but described her from the perspective of another therapist, documenting her struggles with dissociative identity disorder, survivor's guilt, and a complete break from reality following her sister's death. The file revealed that she had been a patient in a psychiatric facility for years, and that the chair, the office, and even her successful psychology practice were all elaborate delusions created by her mind to cope with unbearable trauma. The patients she had been treating were actually different aspects of her own personality, each one representing a different stage of her psychological deterioration. The chair itself was real. It had been her preferred seat during therapy sessions at the facility, but she had transformed it in her mind into a mystical object that could reveal hidden truths. This realization forced her to confront the possibility that everything she thought she knew about herself and her life was a carefully constructed fantasy designed to protect her from a reality too painful to accept. In the final moments of this psychological thriller, Sarah sat in the chair one last time, but now she understood its true nature. It wasn't haunted by external forces, it was haunted by her own inability to face the truth about her sister's death and her subsequent mental breakdown. The chair had become a symbol of her guilt and a repository for all the emotions she couldn't process. As she sat there, the walls of her fabricated reality began to crumble around her, revealing the sterile white walls of a psychiatric facility and the concerned face of her actual therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, who had been working with her for years. The twisted story of the haunted chair had been her mind's way of processing therapy, transforming the mundane reality of her treatment into an elaborate mystery that cast her as the competent professional rather than the patient. But even as the delusion shattered, Sarah felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in years, she was ready to face her fears without the protective barrier of fantasy, to sit in the chair not as a therapist treating others, but as a patient finally ready to heal herself. The haunted chair of doom wasn't really haunted at all. It was a mirror reflecting the deepest, darkest corners of a traumatized mind. Sarah's twisted story reminds us that sometimes the most terrifying mysteries aren't supernatural at all, but psychological, born from our own inability to confront painful truths. The unreliable narrator we followed wasn't just hiding secrets from us, she was hiding them from herself, creating an elaborate psychological thriller to avoid facing reality. What do you think about this mind-bending story? Was Sarah's elaborate delusion a form of self-protection, or was it prolonging her suffering? Share your theories in the comments below. I'd love to hear your interpretation of this dark secret and whether you saw the plot twist coming. If this psychological thriller left you haunted, curious, or questioning the nature of reality itself, hit that like button and share this twisted story with someone who appreciates a good mystery unraveling. There are more mind-bending stories like this waiting for you on the channel, so make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Until next time, stay kind, stay sharp, and stay curious.